Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we're asking, how good is the bounty hunter? First off, I just want to give a quick disclaimer. I am approaching this from the perspective, this guide video is based on the perspective that you guys are playing on hard mode combined with no light. I'm doing that because anything that works on the higher difficulties like that, the hardest environments Darkest Dungeon can throw at you, is also going to work on an easier environment, an easier setting. So let's look at it from that perspective. At the bottom of the screen, you guys can see the bounty hunter's stats compared to the average stats of the other characters in the game. The bounty hunter is basically average HP, average dodge, average speed, slightly above average crit, slightly above average damage, slightly above average stun resist, average blight resist, average bleed resist, average disease resist, slightly above average move resist, average debuff resist, and quite good at trap disarming and quite good at moving around the ordering of your character classes. Bounty Hunter is a position 1, 2, or 3 character, which is pretty rare to have a character be almost as good in any of those 3 positions. That means he's quite good at filling in the remaining spot on a group. Bounty Hunter himself is a kind of almost a 50-50 split between a damage dealer and a stunner. You can use him as both or either quite well. The biggest downside for the role stuff of the Bounty Hunter is he offers no secondary healing, no guarding, and no stress healing, which means he only can do the stunning / damage dealing thing with no overlap or redundancy for anything else, and he's a bit fragile as a whole. His primary ability is Collect Bounty. This ability is actually really good. It's his primary attack, and he can use it from position 1, 2, 3. It can only attack position 1, 2, which is a little bit obnoxious, but he has things to make up for that. But it does additional damage to a marked target and additional damage to a humanoid target. And there are a fair number of human targets. Pretty much the entire Warrens counts as human beast. A number of the bosses are human. It's something that you're going to see that 30% show up pretty regularly. All right. Secondary ability, the ability you're going to use probably most after Collect Bounty for attacking for damage, is Finish Him. Finish Him also can be used from the first 3 positions. It can hit the first 3 opposing positions as well. So you can hit rank 3, which is really nice. That means in the early rounds when you're still killing those stress casters, the Bounty Hunter is quite good at that. It does additional damage to stun targets, which is a neat ability. I like that actually quite a lot. It combos very well with like a Plague Doctor stun on rank 3, 4, which means you're not wasting an action to stun rank 3, then hit it. All you're doing is generating extra damage. Or it also could be used with single target stuns as well, but it's quite a nice little ability. The other 2 abilities you're going to use a lot in the Bounty Hunter are Flashbang and Uppercut. You could realistically probably get away with just using Flashbang if you're running your Bounty Hunter in position 2, 3. You can't Flashbang from position 1, but a lot of the times you can set up comps where you're not going to be in position 1. Flashbang is a single target stun that shuffles the opponent. It's fairly decent, but it does no damage at all and it can't crit. Uppercut is also a single target stun, but it has much less of a range projection than Flashbang does. Flashbang can hit all 4 targets, all 4 positions rather. An uppercut can only hit the front 2. Uppercut also has a knockback as well as actually doing damage, so it can crit, which makes it sometimes situationally better. But as a whole, you should be okay with Flashbang. Flashbang is particularly nice too if the Bounty Hunter gets shuffled. If he gets shuffled to position 4, which is a position he can't use his other abilities in, he can still at least stun from that position. All right, let's take a look at these are the primary abilities I use in the Bounty Hunter. They just buffed one of the abilities. It used to be, I think it used to be called Slice Off, and now it's called Caltrops, and they changed it. And I actually kind of like Caltrops. It's a neat ability that he didn't have before. Can't use it in the front position, but can use it in every other position. It applies a small bleed to position 3 or position 4. The Bounty Hunter doesn't have any other bleed abilities, and you don't tend to build him with plus bleed resist or plus bleed chance, so it doesn't tend to hit as much as you'd like, but it does apply a very nice debuff that gives the target you hit -7 speed. That is almost as good as a stun in a lot of scenarios. Now, granted, the Flashbang literally is a stun in all those scenarios, but sometimes you can find a use for Caltrops. For example, if you're dealing with a target that has high stun resist, or has already been stunned, but you really want to make sure that your team acts ahead of it next round, you can slow it down for the next round. Remember that speed debuffs don't apply to the start of next round because the speed roll is calculated at the beginning of each round and doesn't change based on the turn order doesn't change based on speed buffs that are applied that round. Only the next round's turn order changes. But this is a nice one for finessing, getting an action or a couple actions ahead of a target that you don't want to go next. Quite good versus ghouls, Swinatars, things like this. So I kind of like the ability. I don't always get to use it, but I do like a bounty hunter that's running, for example, position 2-3 bounty hunter who's running something like that is pretty damn solid in my opinion. So other abilities are Come Hither. Come Hither has the same problem that Marks do, which is Come Hither has two rolls, right? Come Hither is a pull. The first roll is Come Hither has to hit the target, and that's one roll, and that's always going to cap at 90%. And the second roll is whether or not the target resists the move or not. And that's another chance for that ability to fail, which means it's just less consistent than doing damage or less consistent than direct targeting stunning something, right? So as a whole, I don't like debuff abilities because they have that additional roll in there. And that's actually the same problem with Caltrops. I didn't mention it there, but it is that exact same problem. And Caltrops actually has a third roll too. It has a hit roll, a bleed roll, and a debuff roll. So if you're counting on that for damage and the speed debuff, you're starting to add a lot of fail chance in there that you should really be cognizant of when you're making that decision. He also has Mark for Death. This is one of the better marks as marks go. Marks, again, have the same problem that all the debuff abilities have. But a minus protection mark tends to be quite a bit more valuable than a minus dodge mark. Just because, your opponent can dodge your mark, which means that if you're applying a minus dodge mark to a high dodge character, there's a good chance you don't get the fucking mark to hit him because he dodges it, which is retarded. However, that's not true of a high protection character. High protection character is about enduring the attacks rather than avoiding them, and you can make targets that have a lot of effective HP, like ghouls with their 40% protection, a lot more vulnerable to actually dying by removing their protection, so a much more finite amount of HP that you have to do. This essentially, the protection-based marks are essentially damage on the mark ability, which is kind of cool, because one of the problems with marks is that you often don't get enough attacks in on the mark target to make up for the cost of casting a mark, and subtracting protection can kind of make that not true. You can actually make it action efficient to mark a target that has high protection and then attack it with somebody else and actually come out ahead in terms of action efficiency, action economy rather, which is really kind of important for actually using marks in a way that matters. So this is one of the better marks in the game. So as a whole, Bounty Hunter is pretty flexible. His abilities are fairly flexible. They're all decent. None of them are awe-inspiringly amazing. And his stats are basically the same. He's decent, average to above average, but nothing awe-inspiring for that. His buffs are kind of an exception, though. His camping skills are maybe the exception to that. They're actually very, very solid abilities. Scout Ahead is nice. It is a 35% scouting chance, which is not as good as the Hound's 50, but it's still pretty damn good, and it only costs you 3 points instead of 4, which means that sometimes you can fit this in when you couldn't otherwise. Scouting is one of the most valuable attributes in the game. Speed and scouting are probably the top two, because scouting is any enemy that you have scouted can't surprise you. You can't get shuffled, and you can't get surprised. And that's a really, really, really big deal for a lot of both compositions that you're fighting as well as a lot of the battles that it could go horribly wrong if you get shuffled and you can't be. So that's pretty damn good. Planned Takedown is awesome. This is extra damage and extra accuracy versus size 2 enemies. Although it says size 2, my understanding is it also applies to size 3 enemies. So it's size 2 and up. And this is going to be when you're fighting bosses, almost always bosses. This is just a nice set of buffs there. It means you don't have to bring an accuracy item on them for those. And the big 25% damage buff is pretty nice as a whole. And also in very certain scenarios, like versus the Siren, who mind controls your characters, if she steals the Bounty Hunter, this damage buff never applies back to hurt you because none of your characters are size 2 or above, which is kind of cool. Tracking in of itself isn't that good. Minus 15% party surprise and plus 10% monster surprise really isn't very valuable. Surprising your opponents are okay, but it's not massively valuable, and not being surprised is you've already done that by scouting. So I don't think very much tracking. It just isn't good enough to use, and it doesn't have the same component that either Bandit Sense or Hound's Watch have. It doesn't prevent nighttime ambush, which means I almost never use this ability. This is how we do it, is just another damage buff. Most of the times unless your group is fairly shy on damage buffs, most of the time you won't use this as how we do it, because planned takedown will be better. But occasionally the cheaper point cost, or just the fact that this is the only buffing character in the group, might mean this would be useful to you, that you'll use something like this. It also provides accuracy and crit. If you notice, unfortunately, these don't really stack. Having plus 25 accuracy is rarely better than having plus 15, because you're still going to max out at 90%. And having 5 crit can be useful, but it's much less consistent than 25% damage. So those are the combat skills for the Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter, as I said, already position 2, 3, mostly damage dealer, sometimes stunner. Any special restrictions on the Bounty Hunter that are interesting? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I find Bounty Hunters are one of my classes that I lose the most, and it's because I treat them like they are a frontline tank character, and they really aren't. They are much more of a position 2, 3 support damage dealer, support stunner, as opposed to the primary kind of get hit in the front ranks. They're a little bit lower HP than the other front rank characters that you're going to use, and I have been punished before for doing that. I like the character as a whole, though. Overall rating, let's think about that for just a second. I would probably give them an average to an average, like somewhere in between average and good, just because they're pretty versatile. It's just they don't give me that sense of extra survivability and dependability that I really would like on the harder missions. I do use them, and I use them pretty regularly, especially for Darkest Dungeon 4, where the human damage is quite nice. The extra damage versus the Ancestor, who is human as well as Eldritch, is really, really nice, as well as their versatility in stunning the back ranks and hitting most of the ranks available to them come out pretty nicely. So I do tend to use them in my playthroughs, but they're not the absolute best character out there. I give them an average rating as well. All right, guys, hopefully that was fun and entertaining for you guys. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.